Yo, Wackaflcka here. Hope you guys having a good morning, evening, night, whichever one fits. Shit like that. Today we're going to talk about ADC or marksman positioning for or around Dragon and Baron. And this comes almost as like a response towards another YouTuber that has started posting some clips after finding him on Reddit. He's posting some short clips, concise ones, with certain advice and tricks and tips towards ADC, etc. So I'll also leave a link below to his channel. Although the problem I find with concise advice, especially for low elo players, and this is something I'll notice often, is that you'll implement the advice, but you do not understand why. So as an example, you'll freeze the wave, but you don't understand why. You've just been taught that it's good. And that is the most frequent problem I'll find in every single elo, is that people will just follow advice blindly. Because very concise advice can be good, but at the same time, without understanding why, it becomes a big problem. But enough for that today. I'll go into that in another video. And when I say low elo, it doesn't have to be really low elo. It can be anything from iron to diamond, right? So you have to understand that this is something a lot of people struggle with, right? And as I said, I see it everywhere, from freezing to clicking randomly, which I made another video on, right? But I'm not going to go into that here. I'll make another video perhaps about that later. Because today we're going to talk about this picture here. The fight zones around Baron and Dragon, right? And you see this picture here. And what was said in the video was, in the green zones you want to fight, in the red one you don't. Because in the red one you have a bigger chance of getting caught and you won't get the opportunity to kite. Okay? And I disagree with that. So today we're going to delve deeper into this picture here, help understand all parts of this map here that is shown, and also I'll give you guys my own thoughts on the subject as well, okay? Okay, so firstly, what do ADC and marksman benefit from, right? It can be anything here when I'm asking. And one of the first things ADC and marksman benefit from are being able to attack from range, right? And the second part they benefit from is not being caught or sandwiched, which means that you'll have enemies approach from every single angle. However, when you play in someone like Twitch or Kog'Maw, it becomes even more prevalent or better that this does not happen to you. Because with someone like Twitch, you really do want people to stack in a line and you don't want them to come from everywhere because your ultimate will always just shoot in a straight line, right? So the more angles people come from, the more spread out they are, the worse it's going to be. So what Twitch wants in particular is to have enemies lined up in a cone in front of you, right? But again, the most important part here for every single ADC is to not get sandwiched or have enemies come from every single angle, right? So they can have a controlled fight and not have people come from behind or to the right or left. So in general, ADCs benefit most from front to back fights. So when looking at this picture, we now have to think, where can I get these front to back fights? Where can I not? Where can I get to utilize the benefits from attacking from range? Where can I not, right? So my first disagreement here with the fight zones that are marked here is that it's in our jungle or their jungle. And jungles have a lot of bushes. And the problem with bushes here is that if they're not warded, the enemy will be able to walk into them or be in them without you being able to attack them back. So that loses that range advantage that we have. Especially again, if you're playing Twitch or someone, you really do want to have vision on them. So that's something I try to avoid most, okay? And of course, because this is solo queue we're playing here, you're not always going to have the bushes you need warded regardless. So even if you are in the fight zone, so regardless of where you are, these bushes here in particular might not even be warded for when you need to fight there or when you are fighting there. So a lot of the time, as an example, if you might kite into this fight zone here, and when you pass the bush here and you enter this area here, and the enemy is about to approach you, they will then enter the bush. And that will be a huge disadvantage for you. But again, this can, of course, vary on depending on which ADC you play, how fed you are, because some fights might be a lot shorter than others, right? So if you're not going to have those extended fights where you last and you kite them into your jungle and through, and they keep chasing, and your fights are a lot shorter, then that might not matter that much. So let's go to the second point here with these fight zones. Choke points, okay? That's the second part there. Choke points is something that some ADCs can benefit a lot from, being Ruden's Hurricane users or someone like Jinx, Saya, Twitch, Kog'Maw, right? And a choke point is somewhere where the enemy will have to go through a narrow gap to get through to you, and in that narrow gap, they will be so clumped up together that they will just get AoE down very easily, right? So again, if you're playing someone like Jinx with Rockets and Hurricane, or you're playing Kog'Maw or Twitch and you have Hurricane, or you have Twitch in the ultimate, they will get nuked down very fast and quick, okay? So where are these choke points in the map here? I'm gonna now show a couple of them and then talk about them, right? One choke point is here. Another choke point is going to be here. And another choke point can be found here, right? And this one's a bit more tricky because there's two entrances here. So of course this will depend, varying, right? But in general, if people are coming here, then this can be a choke point, right? And if they're coming here, then of course the choke point will change depending again which direction they're going. But this will only mostly be a choke point if they're heading towards this way here. And they can also be caught in this area here, in a choke point, or throughout this entire tunnel here, right? Then this entire area will then turn into a choke point if the enemy is walking this way and you're somewhere here, right? Another choke point can of course be here, but it's a very small one. And again, another choke point can be found here and here. And of course here. So there's a lot of choke points here. That's the point. There's a lot of them. And although these choke points are good, it's also again very hard to get the enemy to come towards you through a choke point, right? Like what's the likeliness that you'll be able to make 5 enemies walk this direction here through? Which situation would you need to create for that to happen? It's a very few situations where you can manage to do that. Okay, so there's no point to even think about that, right? Because again, this is about dragons and barons. If they're on baron or they're on dragon, it can be easy to create a choke point here. If you walk in, show yourself, aggro them, they come towards you, and you kite back, okay? Then you can kite back this way. And then when the enemy comes up here, that's when you create the choke point, right? So that choke point can be a lot easier to create as opposed to these other ones that I'm showing. So although choke points are good, they're also very hard to create, okay? And you just have to have that in mind because you can't always get that to happen. But of course, when they're near baron or something, you have these opportunities to create these choke points here. Or if they're coming in towards you to get baron and you're on it or something, as an example, in reverse, it can also be a choke point that can be created, right? And same thing here. So it just depends. Are you doing baron? Then you're going to want to create the choke point at this barrier here, which is also often why you'll see Caitlyn's put traps here, right? Because it's a choke point, right? It's very hard to get past that point. So depending on which side you are, you have to think about it differently, right? But again, it can be difficult to create these places here for you to fight in like that, where you'll be able to just burst them all down in this short minute. But it does happen, and I've had clips of it, so I might be able to find that at some point, but we'll see about that. And I might make montages or whatever, right? Because it's very cool when you get these like short bursted fights where you just like blast them all down with Hurricane or full crit or whatever it may be. But regardless, something I've noticed too with some of our coach is they haven't been able to utilize the choke points properly and not understood them properly either. And then also comes from second disagreement, which is by default, knowing where the choke points are, they become places you do not want to fight, right? So Daniel removes this place here, removes that place here, right? Removes this place here, and entirely this place here too, right? So my second disagreement is that these fight zones aren't even necessarily like accurately representative towards where you want to be. Because as an example, if you want to create this as a choke point, that means that you don't want to be here, right? If the enemy's coming this way, and you're going to create a choke point here, and you're playing an ADC range champion, where do you want to be? You want to be somewhere here, right? So then becomes a good place to fight here, if they're coming from this direction. Because you create the choke point here, and you stand here, right? So that also removes this place there, makes this a bad place to fight. But again, with a guy coach, he would stand here, right? And can you see the problem with standing here? If you're a range champion, and given all the information that I've mentioned before, can you see the problem? Okay, so the problem is going to be that you want to be, as I said, front to back, okay? And what is this place here? It leads into an open space, right? From the choke point. So standing here, you can have enemies approach from every single angle here, depending, right? So they can come from all these angles. And in most scenarios, you're only able to focus one of them. And then if you're lucky, depending on where the other ones are, your Rune's Hurricane, as an example, might splash onto them. But in my scenario here, he was playing Twitch, right? So his ultimate can, again, only fire one direction. And when you have enemies come from so many directions at once, it's not going to be as beneficial, or even, you're not even going to be able to utilize the ultimate by shooting them all at once, right? So it's easy to get enemies jump onto you here because of the place where you're standing. And now quickly, my third disagreement is League of Legends today is a very mobile game. A lot of champions have mobility, right? Talon, Lysandra can go through walls, Kayn can go through walls, ultimates can hit you over the walls, Gangplank can shoot barrels through you over barriers, right, or walls or whatever it may be. And in every single fight zone here, you're very clumped up, right? You don't have a lot of places to go. You have no mobility, right? You're limited in your movement and where you can go. So that's an example. If Kane's coming through here, right, he's approaching you. You don't have a lot of options as to where to go. And second one, if Gangplank barrels are getting towards you or shot towards you, they're going to cover a lot of space too. So it's very hard to avoid those. And also with how limited your vision may be or can be in these situations here, it's also going to be very hard to avoid those. So in general, I do think that most of these fight zones are very bad, unless given an appropriate situation where you might be able to utilize them well. Because in some places or sometimes they might be good places to fight. But especially for or around Baron or Dragon, most of these situations are going to be very difficult for someone to fight unless you're a more mobile champion. But someone like Kog'Maw or Twitch, you don't want to get caught or like put in place, right? You want to have some space to move. And the one argument was that you can flash away at something, right? You can flash over a wall or get away. And that's fine, that's fair enough. But at the same time, by putting yourself in these places to fight, you're also making yourself very vulnerable because you're limited in space and movement in where you can go, right? So it's easy for you to just get locked in place. And we have a lot of champions that can also CC you from range, be it like someone like Lona can ultimate over the wall, right? And you're not going to have a lot of space to move again. So in general, these places are very cramped up and locked. So for you in particular, it's going to be very hard to move around and get away from certain champions or spells. And generally speaking, most teams will have some kind of champion that will be able to punish you for standing in these places here. But just quickly here, as a side note for Twitch, as an example, this place here can be very good, right? Because you can shoot over the wall here. But that doesn't necessarily make this a fight zone, because most of the fight will be happening here with your team, but you're going to be standing here and shooting over. But that doesn't make this a fight zone, right? You're just assisting by shooting over the wall, but they can walk away and then you can't do anything anymore, right? And that will be the same thing with here or something. But it's also, again, very few opportunities or times where that will happen, but it's good to have in mind, of course, that if your team's fighting here, that you can then stand on this side and shoot over. But again, you'll have situations where Talon or Kayn or any mobile champion will just come over the wall, and then again, you're vulnerable and you have two angles to focus, right? And that can create very difficult situations again for Twitch, because you don't want to have two different scenarios or two situations or two people to focus at the same time from two separate directions, because then you might have to retreat, right? Then you're not in a comfortable situations where you can fight anymore. And again, your team's going to be here and there's not going to be anyone to peel you here. So, of course, you have to keep these things in mind at all times. And this, of course, is just to give you an idea of how and why these places can work. And of course, the fight zones might be beneficial sometimes, but you need to keep in mind the negatives here as well. However, now you're probably asking, but Waka, what's your thought process to this map here? How do you want to play this? And that's what I'm going to show you now, okay? And I've shown this before when I made a video on where you want to fight or where do I fight to win, right? And in general, the place I would consider to be a good place to fight is this place here. Anything past this point here is good. Because what does this do? It gives you lots of movement to go back and forth to avoid spells. But also, if the enemy's here and you're here, it also gives you a place to move back. And also, you're limited in the places where the enemy can approach from. Because as an example, if you're here, right? The enemy can come from here, they can come from this direction here, and they can also enter here, right? And they can also alternatively come behind here, depending on how far the games or the fights progressed. But in general, if you're, say, the red team here, and they're on Baron, I want to come from this place here, and then have the fight happen here. And then I can pull back, and I'll always have this wall here to have some sort of safety. If they have someone like Nautilus, if he wants to hit me, then in that sense, we'll have to walk very far out for him to be able to throw the hook at me. Because I can always just path a little bit further behind, and then this wall will always act as a cover for me. For like skill shots, like Nautilus or someone like that, right? But also what this place does have is not a lot of walls, right? So as an example, again, for red side, the only wall they can come over is this one. But depending if they're already on Baron or not, it's going to be different, of course, and it's going to change how you play the map or how you play this scenario. But in general, it's very few walls where they can jump over and get to you. So also doesn't give you that kind of security as well with the walls, right? But it also ensures that you're most likely to be able to get the front to back fight. And also, is there not a lot of bushes there which prevents you from getting the vision or the sighting of enemies that you want, so you can continuously attack the people you want, right? So overall, the best place I do consider to be to fight is this place here, regardless of which side you're playing. If you're blue or red, it doesn't really matter. Always this place here is always going to be the best one in general, right? And that's always where I want to focus and always where I want to come from, because it gives you the most control of the situation, because you do not have to cover behind every single wall. You do not need vision behind every single wall. And that's a big problem that you're going to face in a lot of scenarios where you're going to die or something. It's going to be an enemy coming over a wall you didn't have vision of. It's going to be some sort of spell hitting you over a wall that you didn't have vision of. It's going to be some sort of champion waiting for you in a bush, jumping on you as you're fighting. Okay, there's going to be a lot of threats that you are not able to assess or manage because you're in a locked or cramped place with a place that requires a lot of vision to have control over. So again, adding onto these fight zones, it's going to be a good place to fight if you have the necessary vision to have control over the fight zone as well. But if not, it's also going to be very, very bad. So again, my take on this is, and I've said this before, this area here is best. And I always, if I'm from behind, I always want to enter from this area here. This area here, if I'm blue side, I will clear all the way up and then go behind them. And then enter from this zone, because I have the secure passage back again. I can backtrace my movement and be safe. I will not have enemies approach me from every single angle as I'm trying to pull out. I will not be sandwiched. I will not have enemies surprise me from several angles. I will have full and clear vision of the area as I walk in there, right? I'm not going to have any unseen threats approach me, because all my threats are going to be in front of me. They will never be behind me. And that's something you need to keep in mind, always. And that's a big take here. Always make sure that all your threats are in front of you, and there's no threats that's going to be able to come from behind you, right? And that's the thing you need to keep in mind most here, regardless of where you're fighting here. Are all the threats in front of me? Are there going to be any threats that can come from behind, or are they in front of me? If they're in front of you, then it's fine. And just think about that, okay? And that's the biggest take here. Are the threats in front, or can they come from behind or the side? Will they be able to sandwich me? And if they can, then maybe you need to rethink, right? If you're going here and you know there's a champion lingering here, then you cannot delve deeper into this area here. Because when you're here fighting these people, then this guy will come from behind and then he's suddenly sandwiched. And it's not as easy getting out then, regardless how fed you are. Because again, you can only focus one person. You're an ADC, you're going to be squishy. So again, maybe this champion here is not even fed, but he's able to kill you or distract you enough for the people to attack you, right? But in general, again, my biggest take here, this place is the best one to fight, and this is probably the worst one to fight, because of how many bushes and unseen threats and people that can approach you. Especially if you're from behind. I want to try and avoid this place here. Never enter, never go, okay? Always come from top side down, okay? Because going down here, and opposite from bot lane, enter from bot side and then go up towards dragon. Never come in from the middle, okay? Because the middle has the most entrances and the most possible or the most frequent places or the most accessible place for people to come in and enter, right? So go from where there's limited amount of entrances and then go in. So the best place for me to fight, or how I see it, is this place here. So always, especially if you're from behind, you don't have any contested vision, enter from this area here. It's the safest, it's the best, okay? And that's the biggest take from this. Always enter here if you're behind. If you're ahead and you have control, it doesn't really matter. As long as you have control of the area, it's fine. Then just take care of the enemies here. Deal with them in the fight zones or the choke points, as I said. But that's it. I hope you guys continue to have a good morning, evening, night, whichever one fits, shit like that. This has been a Wackaflcka Explain, or whatever it may have been. I hope you guys have a good one. Peace.